Hello and a very warm welcome back to the garden. In this video I'm going to go through a few of the techniques that we use to stake our plants. Now that we are getting through the month of May, many of our perennials are surging for the skies. We've gone past that stage now when they're just small growths coming through the ground. That was in March and April, and now in May they are burgeoning and they're getting, as each day goes by, they seem to be growing more and more quickly. One thing we do need to make sure this time of year is that we get our staking in early. Don't wait until the wind and the rain has thrashed the plants, bent the stems, and then you're hurrying out quickly with your canes and with your stakes to try and get them upright again. Sometimes that may be too late, and sometimes when plants do get bent, it is permanent. You can't then straighten them, and the herbaceous poppy is one of the good examples of this. Once that does fall, if you don't catch it straight away, the stems start to then search for the light, and then you have a nice kink in that stem, and it can destroy a display. So my advice is get the stakes in early and prevent all that heartache later down the line. There are a number of plants that we do need to stake because they do tend to flop as the season progresses. We are getting to that time now of the Chelsea chop, and you can be taking a lot of your perennials down by a half or a third to reduce that need for staking, and this produces more of an abundance of flowers. Now they are smaller flowers than they would be originally, but it does mean that there's less need for staking. And we did this with our asters and our helianthus last year, and this worked really well. For ones that we're not going to be doing the Chelsea chop on, we do need to get in with our staking. While we can still get into the borders, that's one of the main things as well. Plants in the borders have not yet reached their ultimate size, so there is some squeezing space around if you're careful to get around to put these stakes in. Leave it another month or so later, and you're going to find it very difficult to find foot space for you to go and do this. So one of the plants that we stake is Lysimachia, and this one is Firecracker, and I'm just going to show you that now. So this is Lysimachia Firecracker, and this really is a cracker of a plant. Now it is on the invasive side. Now unfortunately that is something that does put a lot of people off, and I must admit, as it came to cutting this border back in early March, we were in two minds whether to take it out or not, but I'm glad we didn't, because this beautiful purple foliage is just so worth it. It's worth the effort going round in the spring to make sure that you keep it in check and just cutting those extra bits that are getting into places where you don't want them to be, keeping them out of the way and chopping them out. But this is one of the plants which does need some attention. We can do the Chelsea chop on this, but we do like to try and keep a bit of height, so we don't mind having that effort to put a stake in with this one. So what all I've used here is these lovely ring stakes. These are metal stakes. Now they are on the costly side. You can usually get a pack of maybe 2 or 3 for £10 to £15, so they're not exactly cheap, but they are an investment. We had these back in our Sheffield garden, and that's probably going back maybe 10-15 years ago, and these are still the same ones. They last probably a lifetime. They're well made. They're black, so they are in keeping with the garden. They're not kind of detracting from the plants. And what we do is we're just putting a few of these in the points where it's probably going to get blown over. So one just here on this side, one kind of in the middle there, and then one on the other side. And then hopefully that should be sufficient. With tightly packed perennial borders, plants do tend to help to keep each other upright. They use each other as an anchor to kind of make sure they don't flop over. So I know we're kind of quite tightly packed in here, but we did find last year that we did need to do this. So I'm getting these in now early, so that there's no problem when the wind does come and the rain. These are going to stay upright with no damage. The next plant that I do need to stake is this beautiful Lychnis chalcedonica, and this is it now. It's getting really good height on now. And what we find with this, if we don't stake it, it does flop over in the rain, and it's one of those plants that it will bend the stems, and once they're bent there is no going back. So we do need to get in there early. If you had something a little bit stronger in front of it, it may just keep that upright, but we only have a geranium here, and geraniums are very soft. The growth is very soft, and will not provide much support for a plant like this. So again, I'm using these half moon, and this is what these are, just half moon stakes. And all I'm going to do is just find where the plant is. So just move away some of these and then just press that into the ground. You may need to be quite firm, and just make sure that all your stems are within that little hoop. Now these are growing against a wall, so I don't need to put anything behind it. If these are in the border and you had other small plants around them, you may need to put another one. So I'll just demonstrate. You may need to put another one along the back so it completely encases the plant. But for this reason, we only need the one because it is towards the wall. And the same applies to this one here. So I'll get it in, press it down, and you can, depending on how you like the stakes, you can put it down quite low to begin with, and then by the time this geranium starts to stand back on end, you probably won't even know they're there. I did mention the poppies earlier. Now we only have the one oriental poppy, and this is a beautiful red one called Beauty of Livermere. So for this one we do have a special stake for it. This is a nice round top with a stake that goes into the ground like that. So this will just sit into the ground with the foliage and all the plants within the centre. So that can go in now. The buds are already starting to form, so we should be getting those very soon, those lovely red. I like the way that the red flowers just look beautiful with this lovely purple foliage of the tree. Stunning, and I can't wait for that to come out. So just make sure you find a space for it to go, and then just press it down into the soil, and just make sure that all this plant is within that ring. And it can go pretty far down like that, and that's done. Some of you may be able to remember back to last summer where we had this beautiful geranium Rozanne, and it was flowering next to the lovely yellow Rebecca Diamii, and that was one of the videos we did about lovely combinations of flowers and colours. And what we did with this to try and get it so it goes upright, because this does tend to have a bit of a spreading kind of habit, what we did is just put one of these half moon stakes in. So this is one that is a little bit more flexible, so I can kind of move it a little bit in and out. It's not as rigid as those black ones. And what we can do now at this time of year is get that in. So I'm just pushing it right down into the plant. And then as that grows, what will happen is we can just like lift it a little bit higher as it grows taller and taller. But that will just keep it so that rather than trying to spread outwards, we get that lovely height, which then keeps it nice and in keeping height wise with the Rebecca and the other plants around it. My ultimate favourite stake, however, has to be the one we have around our Hydrangea Annabelle. This is a complete sphere. Now I think sometimes these are referred to as peony stakes or peony supports, and they do have a whole round structure. Now sometimes they come with the one ring, sometimes you have 2 or 3 rings to catch in other bits of the lower branches, but these are my favourite, but unfortunately they do cost the most. So we only have, I think we have 2 of those, and that's all we have of them ones because they are quite expensive. Now we do make the most of the other half moon ones if we need to, and then use a second one around the back of it if that is required, and that just keeps the cost down a little bit. But these are my ultimate favourite, because what you can do with these, as the plant is growing, you can make sure that these lovely shoots are inside that middle ring, and then you can just leave it alone. You can just go ahead and grow as much as it wants to, and you're not going to have any issues with it flopping over. My last one to show you are these lovely small stakes. Now these are pretty cute, aren't they? These don't cost very much money, and these are perfect for just getting just the flower stems to stand upright. So say for example on this beautiful Princess Juliana Geum, if I didn't want to have these stems coming over the path, I can just stick those in at an angle and I can just keep those a little bit more upright. And this is particularly more important where our table and chairs are, because we're coming past this a lot and we don't want to be hitting these stems and upsetting the flowers and destroying them. So if you get them in and put them in quite deep, what it will happen is it will keep them nice and straight up. And because they're very, very small, it does also mean that you hardly see them. And it just means now we can walk along this part of the decking without banging into them. Now, of course, with all that being said, and using all those fancy stakes, there is sometimes no substitute for a normal garden cane topped with a cane topper and just a ball of twine. And sometimes that is just an easy way, particularly if you have maybe one stemmed flowers, so things like foxgloves or things like the bascums, ones that produce tall upright stems. And all you can do with those is you can place one of these alongside it and then use your twine to do a figure of 8 kind of knot and just tie it in multiple places, and that should keep it nice and upright. You could also substitute the half moon stakes that we have and have 2 of these placed in the ground at like an angle like this, and then depending on how wide or how tall the plant is, you can then adjust your width of the barrier, shall we say. Usually the foxgloves are okay in our garden unless they decide to be a giant and they want to go as tall as the sky, in which case we do need to get a stake in there. But for the moment we're going to leave them as they are. If there is a possibility of that happening and we're seeing them get really, really tall, then all we'll do is just use one of these canes, put it in alongside the back so you can't see it, and then just support it in that way, and that will just keep it upright. Again, foxgloves, once they fall over, the stems bend and that's it. You've got wonky foxgloves. And we did have that a number of years ago, and it was quite amusing, and it's the focal point when people come in the garden and visit and say, oh, that's a lovely foxglove. It's an unusual shape. It's because it's fallen over in the wind or the rain. And then as it started to grow towards the light, it's giving you that kink in it. There's nothing you can do about it, just celebrate the uniqueness. As I've already said, a lot of our other perennials will be having the Chelsea chop, so that'll just mean that we're going to have a reduced need to stake. Now, it doesn't say that we don't need to stake at all. Sometimes you still need to do a bit of staking. It just means to say you don't need to get the stakes in right this minute, because you're not going to be needing them straight away. And it also means that you are going to be needing the stakes a little bit less, and hopefully, in some cases, not at all. So thank you very much for watching this video about our staking techniques. Please give us a like, please subscribe, please drop any comments in the comments box below. Share your thoughts on the way you stake your plants, how you deal with things. You may have elaborate ways that we've not tried or we've not even thought about. We will see you very, very soon on the next one. In the meantime, please take care, and as always, happy gardening.